Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and today we're going to be talking about the Rainbow Six franchise. This is very much a discussion that is spurred on by Rainbow Six Siege, more specifically, the challenges, I guess what you'd call them, situation challenges that are available in Rainbow Six Siege. They're a set of challenges, 10 of them in total. You guys saw me start a series for them earlier this week that are all about teaching the player about the game, about Rainbow Six Siege. You start off playing as recruits, then you start off as playing as the different operators, and all of these situations take place on the same maps that you play the multiplayer and the terrorist hunt modes in, but they have sort of they're dressed up a little bit to kind of seem like micro campaigns. You even get a small briefing at the start of the mission from the sort of director of the Rainbow teams now, and they feel semi small little story pieces. Nothing really deep at all. It's very, very shallow, but it was enough to get my my sort of nostalgia gland tingling a little bit and get me thinking about the campaign components of past Rainbow games and to have a discussion about it, about what made them really special. And why I think Rainbow Six Siege then deserves to also have some sort of a campaign element at some point in time, whether it be DLC or in a sequel. I think a lot of us would like to see it return. I know a lot of us were upset when we found out Siege wasn't going to have it. And it wasn't just because we felt like, it wasn't going to be a complete package, without it. It was because we genuinely liked what past Rainbow games had done with their campaign components, single player or co-op. And when I really looked in the past, looked back at Vegas, going back to Raven Shield, and tried to think about what really stood out for me amongst those experiences, there's a lot of small things that obviously make a Rainbow game. The tactical nature of the gunplay, the more slow, methodical movement. It's very easy to die, especially in the harder difficulties. And then just the tactical nature of it all, the requirements from the game for the player to think a little bit more, to really decide on how they engage the enemy and the tools that they use to engage that enemy. But there was one component that stood out for me more than anything else, and that was the way that the developers always gave the player control of their AI buddies. Team Rainbow, especially when we look at Vegas 1 and 2, wasn't just about you, the individual, and some random dudes who stood next to you, maybe shooting a guy every now and then. No, it was about Team Rainbow. Yes, you took first-person control of one specific member of Team Rainbow, but alongside of you, you had a whole, fire team. You had a small group of guys, a small tactical squad that was there to work together. They were there to coordinate and to develop tactics to engage and to conquer certain situations. And the developers made sure that you had full control of that. Yeah, the AI could go out, they could do their own thing. They were fully capable of defending themselves and engaging targets on their own, but you had that element of advanced control. You could set them up on doorways. You could tell them to flash rooms. You could tell them to smoke rooms. You could tell them to, go silent, to go loud, to run suppressor, to take the suppressors off. You could tell them to, sit back, to be defensive. You had so many small commands that really helped you decide on how you started off, how you ambushed an enemy, or how you engaged in a hostage rescue situation. And I don't think there was really any moment in any other first-person shooter that was ever quite as satisfying as stacking up your team on the door and then flashing and clearing a room, eliminating all the enemies inside in real time, nonetheless. None of that slow-mo stuff. And, eliminating everyone in the room, leaving the hostage safe and sound so you could extract them, and Team Rainbow wins at the end of the day. There's something about that situation and situations like it that is endlessly satisfying. And I'm not knocking Siege for not having a campaign component. Again, I'm using the previous success that the Rainbow franchise has had with their campaign experiences to advocate why I believe Siege deserves to have a component like that. And then when we look at Siege itself, right, it's a really great, fantastic, and frantic multiplayer experience, but they've done a really good job of making sure that it's still a content-rich game, in terms of the PvE elements. We have Terrorist Hunt, which is all fleshed out now. You have, rescue the hostage, you have defuse the bomb, you have defend the hostage, defend the bomb, and you have classic Terrorist Hunt mode. So it's all there, it's been pretty well established. I like what they've done with it. And then, as I said, you have the situation. So there's no denying the game. It has a lot of content. But when we look at the actual gameplay mechanics that have been introduced into Siege, I would go nuts to see these actually implemented into a proper Rainbow campaign, that I could play alone, have full control of some other operators, or that I could play with with a friend cooperatively like I did with Vegas 1 and 2. A lot of it comes down to the operator system itself. I think for the first time, the operators from Team Rainbow actually feel alive. In fact, I think it's easy to forget that all of these different, operator factions, the Polish, the Spetsnaz, and the FBI, all of them have come together to form Team Rainbow. You look at them more like they're individual characters, Ash and IQ and, and Mute and so on and so forth. They've done a great job of establishing actual characters inside of a first-person shooter where, frankly, the characters don't actually need to matter that much. It's a multiplayer-focused experience. They've nailed that, and I would love to see that represented inside of a campaign. On top of that, you have all the actual gameplay elements that now exist inside of Siege. Rappelling is better than it's ever been before in a Rainbow game. We have the destructible environments. You can breach through walls and floors. You can set up barricades. You have all of the different operator gadgets. Like, all of this is just so ripe to be thrown into a sort of tactical, linear sandbox experience like we've seen in the past with Vegas 1 and 2 and going back to Raven Shield and all the other classic Rainbow games. Like, it's just so ready to be put into that environment. And I would love to see the team that worked on Siege have the opportunity to do that, whether it be in a sequel or through some piece of DLC. That would mean a lot, I think, to the Rainbow community. And I hope that the team who worked on Rainbow Six, the guys at Ubisoft and the other teams, feels the same way about making something like that happen at some point. Like, there's no doubt that Siege is a success. Yeah, they're dealing with a lot of after-launch issues, server issues. Sadly, that stuff did not get ironed out in beta. Probably just publisher restraints at that point. You can't delay the game anymore, but they're recovering so far. I really hope they can continue to support the game. It seems like they're going to be doing it with DLC. Let's hope they'll actually do it by listening to the community and tweaking and refining the experience. And let's hope that we can see another Rainbow in the future. Not saying it's something they got to pull out of a rabbit hat, out of a magic hat tomorrow or next year, but I very much want to see Rainbow return with that campaign component in the future, because I think it's a franchise that deserves it. I think when I talk about franchises that best represent how important campaign first-person shooter experiences are, the Tom Clancy games come to mind. Ghost Recon, looking at Advanced Warfighter, even Future Soldier did a pretty good job, but going back to Ghost Recon 2, and then again, looking at what they've done with Rainbow. These are games that I think are prime examples for why that type of experience deserves to continue to exist moving forward into games. And I don't think there's any doubt that games like that are going to exist. I know a lot of people last year, especially with the launch of all these multiplayer-only games like Siege, were talking about the death of that type of, campaign, single-player, first-person shooter experience. And I think they're still here. But I do think it's time for them to evolve. And I think if we look at the framework for what Ubisoft is aiming to do with Ghost Recon Wildlands, you can kind of see elements of that. They're looking for a game that can be played single player with player control, with AI that it can be controlled by the player, or that can be played up to 4-player cooperatively. But now they're taking the Ghost Recon game out of that linear sandbox and they're putting it in an actual open world sandbox and saying, all right, here's what we do best. We give the player the tools and the gadgets and the tech to engage in all of these different combat scenarios, a little bit of first person or third person shooter with some chess elements in it, and let's make it open world. I think Ubisoft and team, the guys behind Ghost Recon, are trying to evolve that. They're trying to, change the way that we look at those sort of tactical gameplay experiences. And I'm all for that. But at the same time, I have no problem with that sort of sandbox, that linear sandbox that Rainbow has always done so well. It's not necessarily full linear. They're not just forcing the player from room to room, open this door, kill enemies inside. This isn't a shooting gallery. It's very much a chessboard. And there's all these different entrance ways. There's all these different ways you can engage the enemy. But there is that sense of linear progression in the campaign. I've always been okay with that. I'm not looking for the Rainbow games to magically start having this amazing story and detailed characters and complex scenarios. No, I think that would strip away from the gameplay, the raw tactical gameplay that has made these experiences so great. That's why I played Rainbow in the past. I didn't need Vegas to have a story that made sense. I didn't need Advanced Warfighter to fully explain to me what was going on. I just needed to be thrown into those situations and then asked to think a little bit in order to solve them. And along the way, use the ability to control my teammates, my AI teammates, use the ability to use all of my gadgets and gear to overcome, the tactical challenge that has been presented before me. That, to me, is what makes games tactical first-person shooters like Rainbow, like Ghost Recon, so damn good. And I think we can easily say that games under the Tom Clancy name have been doing it best for a very long time. I won't forget about SWAT. I know someone will mention SWAT. There's no denying I would love to see SWAT return in a big way. And, you know, I think Siege has taken a different direction, and that's okay. I think maybe it's brought Rainbow back into the light. You know, it's sort of the reboot for Rainbow as a whole. Now let's see the franchise continue to grow and evolve once again, like it was doing, you know, 10 years ago. Let's see it head in new directions. Let's see it, you know, brave new frontiers. Let's see it bring back those campaign components. Let me know what you guys think about the topic as a whole. I know a lot of people are probably on the same boat as I am. We want to see this stuff come back. We love Siege. I love Siege to death. I wish I picked it up earlier last year, but I'm happy I have it. I'm replaying it throughout 2016. I think it's a hell of a game. And considering it's on sale like everywhere right now for like $10 to $20 off, if you look in the right places, I think now is a great time to pick it up and see what I'm talking about. Even if you don't care for multiplayer, there's a lot of good stuff going on in Terrorist Hunt. I think there's a lot of replayability when you talk solo or cooperatively with friends. And here's to the future of Rainbow. Here's to the future of tactical first-person shooter experiences like it. Any thoughts, any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. If you guys want to share some of your best campaign memories from games like Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon, feel free to start doing some storytelling down there as well. You guys know I love a good nostalgia-filled video game story. And hopefully I'll see you guys somewhere on a fast rope, killing some terrorists and saving the VIP, or the football, right? That's what they used to call it in Ghost Recon all the time. It was always the football. It's probably the worst code name ever.